in Parshat Achare Mot, there is this expression that's used that these are the commandments that the person should keep and chai bahem, and live by them. It's an expression that is unique in the 5 books of Moshe, but it's also used a few times in Yechezkel. Prophet Yechezkel talks about how the person who will keep the commandments and live, if he will do tshuva, even if he was sinful before, if later he will come back, he will be living by the commandments. But what I wanted to discuss is one of the very well-known rabbinical drashot on these words. And that is in Tractate Yoma, the Talmud tries to explain why it is that we break all kinds of commandments in order to let a person live. Let's say a person is in danger, we break Shabbat, we break Yom Kippur. So the tractate that deals with Yom Kippur, it's a reasonable question. It's a known fact that we break these commandments in order to save a person. Whether he himself or other people are supposed to break, even if it's a lot of people who need to break Shabbat in order to save someone's life. Moreover, even if it's a possibility of not fully saving a person, we know that in any case this person is going to die. But the question is that maybe he'll live a little bit longer. We're supposed to break Shabbat, and even if a lot of people are involved, we all have to break Shabbat in order to prolong this person's life. So this is the general rule in the Torah, but the question is, where is it hinted? And various rabbis in that Talmudic sugya bring different proofs, and the main proof that they ultimately bring is from our verse, that the Torah is given for life, v'chai b'hem, right? The Torah is in order to live, not in order to die. So I wanted to mention a very interesting story that's related to this, and it's brought in a book called Ateret HaMikra. The rabbi that just brings from various sources. He's not so much an original thinker, but rather it's in a form of questions and answers. This book is available on HebrewBooks.org. It's a book in Hebrew, and he brings all kinds of sources and all kinds of explanations based on the weekly reading. So it's a good start for someone who wants to find some nice drash for a weekly parsha. They could start by just looking at some of the questions that this rabbi asks. And on this verse, he brings a very interesting story about Rav Shmuel Salant. Anybody heard about this person? I'm sure a lot of people heard about Rav Yisroel Salanter. There was this city from which a number of important rabbis came, and most well-known ones are Rav Yisroel Salanter and Rav Shmuel Salanter. So Rav Yisroel Salanter is considered the father of the Musar movement, so-called, the movement of Jewish ethics, about, I don't know, maybe 150 years ago or something like that. It's hard exactly to place the exact date. This person had a reasonably long life. It's generally, I would consider Musar movement a kind of similar to Hasidic movement within Lithuanian Jewry. It's known that among Jews living in Litva, Lithuania, and in Latvia, and in parts of Belarus, they were quite similar. It all used to be part of Poland at certain time periods. At any rate, the Jews living there were not so many Hasidim among them. Although Chabad, by the way, comes from those areas, from Belarus. But there are a few other groups like Slonim and Stolin. But most of the Hasidic movement was in other places. And in these places, there was a very strong what's called mitnagdim, the opponents of Hasidut, or the specific Hasidut movement. I mean, nobody's going to oppose Hasidut per se. Hasidut just means righteousness. But the specific things that were known to be parts of Hasidic movement, although Hasidim were also different from each other in many ways, but some of the things that Hasidim did, there was certain opposition in those areas. It's usually associated with Vilna, with the capital of Lithuania, the main opposition, and with the Vilna Gaon, although it's much more complex than that. But at any rate, there were some places where Hasidut took very strong roots, and there were a lot of Hasidic rabbis and Hasidic leaders in certain parts of Poland and Ukraine and other places. But there were other places where the opposition was quite strong, and there were much fewer Hasidim and much stronger non-Hasidic groups. But what happened was, about 100 years after the main Hasidut developed, there was a new movement that, in my opinion, in a lot of ways is similar to Hasidut. Not exactly, but some of the things at least. Some of the things. And by the way, there was some opposition to that movement as well. It's known that the Musar movement, there was some opposition to it as well. It wasn't as strong as the opposition to Hasidus. It didn't split to the same degree, but there were quite a number of great rabbis who didn't like certain things that the Musar movement proposed. Again, Musar in a more general sense, nobody's going to be against. Just like Hasidut in a more general sense just means righteousness, Musar just means ethics. And of course, one of the earliest books of Musar would be the Sefer Mishlei, the Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. It's a biblical work. That's a book of Musar. It actually says in the beginning that the teachings of this book are to promote Musar. So in a general sense, nobody's against Musar. It can be against Musar. It's a biblical term. I mean, the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, also has a lot of Musar. But we're talking about the more narrow sense, that the movement, Musar movement, it had its own flaws, at least from the point of view of certain rabbis. Even the Chazon Ish, one of the greatest Lithuanian Gdolim in a different generation, already closer to our time. There's still people today who knew him personally, right? He already lived basically a generation or two ago. A part of his life he lived in the land of Israel. So Chazon Ish was generally against Musar, at least the Musar movement. But guess what? His book against Musar is considered a Musar book in a more general sense. It usually, in the same category, if you come to a synagogue, you'll see the book of Chazon Ish, the Emunah B'tachon, the main book that deals with Musar, is actually in the category of Musar itself, even though it was a book written in opposition of the specific, the more narrow sense of Musar. Whatever the case may be, the founder of Musar movement, in the general sense, is considered Rabbi Israel from Salant. Rav Shmuel Salant, just like the general founder of Hasidut, in the narrow sense of Hasidim today, is considered Baal Shem Tov. Even though, of course, there were a lot of different movements within the more encompassing general group. I once asked myself actually a question: how do you define somebody who is Hasidish? What would be the definition? Because a lot of the definitions, they pertain to some Hasidic groups, but not others. And some other definitions may actually include people who are definitely not Hasidim, but who do the same thing. So it's not exactly clear, actually. But the general founder of all of these people who call themselves Hasidim generally is considered Baal Shem Tov, in the most general sense. So the same way, the general founder of all the Musar movement, in the narrow sense of Musar, is considered Rabbi Israel Salant. Even though, like I said, there were more than one group, they were quite different. The Musar schools were quite different from each other. They had real significant differences in understanding certain things and then in how they lived their lives. But whatever the case may be, this Rabbi Salant is a very well-known personality. A less known personality is Rabbi Shmuel Salant. So this person lived most of his life in the land of Israel, slightly more than 100 years ago. He died a little bit more than 100 years ago. So this was under the Turks, at the time when there was almost nothing there. There was hardly anything. And so he is the one who founded actually a hospital in Jerusalem, in Jerusalem. So the story goes like this, that the book Ateret HaMikra brings. That there was a certain person there, a very righteous man, who after praying in the morning, he would recite psalms and also learn Torah, and then he would go to his job, and he was a doctor in that hospital. And Rav Shmuel Salant told him that this is not the way. He said, there's a lot of people who are learning Torah here already, but there are very few doctors. There's not enough doctors. We have enough people who are learning Torah, but there's not enough doctors. Right? V'chai bahem. The most important thing you could do is right after praying, you should go to the hospital. Maybe there will be somebody who you might need to save a life even, right? So your job is after you pray to go to the hospital. Your main job is to be the doctor. Since you know how to treat people, this is what you should be doing. Very interesting, right? Something that you don't necessarily expect from a rabbi, especially the greatest leader at the time of Jerusalem and the land of Israel. But that's exactly what the story says. I recently got a book in the library by ArtScroll about a certain doctor, Dr. Adler in England. He lived most of his life in England, and it's an amazing book. The person was basically all he was doing all his life is saving lives, and and not just lives. I mean, treating people, and he's considered on the level of the greatest rabbis, if not more, in certain sense. He's described as one of the really, really, really great righteous people, because everybody has a purpose in life. We cannot just say that the greatest idea, that the most perfect thing the person can do is become a rabbi or become a Torah scholar. This is also true of every Jew has to learn Torah, but there are different missions in life that different people have, and a great doctor can be can have an enormous accomplishment. And a lot of times, I think the words of Rav Shmuel Salant apply to us today as well. That a lot of times we do have enough people who are already learning Torah, Baruch Hashem, but not always have enough people who are good doctors and otherwise people who could bring a lot of good in various other ways. That doesn't absolve, of course, these people from learning Torah. Also, every Jew is supposed to learn Torah sometimes, but the doctor who is busy in the hospital most of the day, so his limud Torah could be a relatively short period of time, but his main job is to save lives and save people. That's what I think. And if you like this video, please press like, and please subscribe to our channel.